So I'll start off with politics, right?
Perfect intro. Welcome
Good.
everybody to another episode of Workflow Wednesday, where we bring on industry experts like our guest this week. Oh, I'm not mirrored anymore. Brady Betzel, online editor of the show Life Below Zero. I think was your most recent one that I saw online, but among other hats that you wear. And we're again joined by Matt Bach, our internal expert. And so, just in case, Brady, who, if anybody doesn't already know who you are, go ahead and introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about your background, what you do, and all that good jazz.
Sure. Hi, I'm Brady Betzel. I'm an online editor slash colorist, and I work on a bunch of shows from, like you said, Life Below Zero on Nat Geo to a couple spin-offs of that in Alaska. A couple Quibi shows recently, some Netflix stuff coming up. It's all over the place. And yeah, I basically blur naked people and make stuff not look like it was filmed in a dark closet.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's great. Blurred naked people. So,
Yeah.
Naked and Afraid, is that a lot of your
Ooh,
work
when I
too?
saw that show, my anxiety went through the roof because I
That
was
poor-
waiting to see the credits. They had like 20 or 30 blur people, I think,
No
and
way.
some of them were very good blurs. I was really impressed for the angles and
Yeah.
the roto and stuff. I mean, they deserve big Emmys for that.
The things you don't think about, when you're watching like a show.
That
Seriously
stuff
though,
is remarkable.
there's always a little. Oh, that's too bright. Never mind. There's always little things behind the scenes that people either take for granted or just don't even notice,
Hmm.
and that's really interesting to see.
Yeah, not
Um,
to mention camera people you got to paint out, or boat IDs, or license
oh,
plates, or birds, or drones, or
I
everything you got to
hear,
paint out.
Yeah,
especially for the audio, I hear airplanes are a big problem with audio, at least.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
airplanes and even just general like noise out in the wilderness, or if they're on a reality show in a house like Real Housewives, just kids or car. There's so much stuff.
yeah, so I know we're going to try to get a lot of questions from anybody who's
Sure,
watching, but
sure.
I've got one already to kind of launch
Yeah.
us off. So you're talking about like all like the boat names or numbers on
Yeah.
there and all the things you got to paint out. A lot of times, are those like just blurred out, or are you using like content aware fill kind of stuff, or is it just like
So
up to the director?
so I work predominantly in Avid Media Composer,
Okay.
but occasionally in Premiere and Resolve as well. But a lot of the times it comes down to time. So if I'm
Hmm.
given 4 hours to do my job, I have to kind of say, all right, I can get the show in shape for in 3 hours, and then I'll spend an hour on blurs. And if it costs more, we'll have to go to the client and get that approved. And so boat stuff, depending on the show. So if I have enough time, I'll paint them out. And if I can actually do it without making a garbage roto, but most time you get away with blurs. So if there's like 100 in an episode, I'll be blurring. But if it's like I don't know, three, and I can do it, I might try to match the paint of the boat and use Mocha or Boris effects.
Hmm.
Sometimes the Avid stuff, and if I have to, I'll go to After Effects. But I try to stay inside of Mocha and Boris for the most part.
Nice,
Yeah,
nice.
makes sense.
Uh, Ahead of time, do you have to find all those points to take out, or is that somebody else's job to scrub through and say, hey, there's something, hey, there's something?
Typically, there's legal departments, and a producer would go through the whole show and say, I need this person blurred, this person's face, this kid's face, this boat, this license plate, whatever. Sometimes though, I'll find them, and I'll just, if I'm comfortable enough that I know what they want, I'll just be like, oh, I got to blur that, and then I point it out when we're reviewing it. But
Hmm.
I mean, for the most part, license plates always need to be blurred. Boat
Right.
IDs typically need to be blurred. Um, Addresses always need to be blurred or painted. And then faces, it just depends. It depends on the production company, how many releases they get, if they don't get a release, or if one of them one time, a long time ago, there was an airport scene of a Real Housewives type show, and they're like everything but the people, and there were 50 people surrounding them taking pictures and artwork on the walls. So essentially, it's like just that.
Yeah. Wow.
And then their hands go like this, and you're like, well, okay, I got to cut that out. That's half a day's worth of work for 30 seconds.
Yeah.
Right.
But most of the time they go,
That's
we'll find a new shot.
Yeah.
that's pretty neat. Wow. I don't even know. So actually, recently, I was just looking at you were looking at some updates to Premiere Pro.
Yeah.
There was mention of HDR and oh, I can't remember now. I'm so sorry. I
Scene
should have
edit
wrote it down.
detection?
Scene
maybe?
edit detect.
That's
Yep.
the one. And I was curious. I was curious about that actually. Without I just kind of skimmed through it and
Sure.
I'd like to. Would you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. So when a show comes to us to be color corrected, typically I'm the guy who conforms it and preps it for the colorist, a separate job. But sometimes I color, depends on the budget. But sometimes the client will send just a flat QuickTime with no edits in it. In that case, we have to chop it up by camera or by edit. So in Resolve, there's essentially the same thing. You say, hey, check out this QuickTime, find the edit points, and it gives us add edits, and we can individually color the cameras without necessarily seeing the raw clips. Easier. So now Premiere does it, and it's actually a very big help for anyone who colors inside of Premiere. If you get a lot of QuickTimes instead of like a project. So if I typically get like an Avid project, I'll have all the clips and I can make an EDL or an AAF to send to the colorist to use in Resolve or Nakota. They color, send me back the clips, and I can relink them and edit the raw show, basically.
Yeah, because I guess just for anyone who's not familiar with coloring, who's on the stream, the reasons you have to do that is because every scene is different. You can't just apply like one set of color to everything because one shot might be really dark, you got to lighten it. One shot might be a little overexposed, you got to bring it down, or the colors are changed. And so, like, when you're getting that shot for a colorist, or when they have like the entire, think of like an episode of like TV, like you've got to go in and change every single one. And normally, how you would do that in like Resolve is you edit each clip separately.
And a lot of times, for like a 45-minute show, which is typically what a 60-minute show is plus commercials,
Right.
there's like 1,000 to 1,200 edits, and that doesn't mean different cameras, but that just means there's that many edit points, and so you have to have them separate, like you were saying. So if I have a GoPro in one spot with a low angle, and then I have a drone from way up high that has a different exposure, then I have two camera guys or camera people, and then who knows, they probably wearing some weird camera that's like just doing weird stuff and wrong frame rates and bad color, and who knows.
So I got a question about coloring, like all these sprint clips. So oftentimes you have like multiple angles and you're switching back and forth between the two. How do you handle like applying the same color grade to like that one angle over and over and over again? Because I'm assuming you don't want to like freehand it over multiple times because it's going to look slightly different.
It depends. So it depends on the editing app, really. So in like Resolve, you can essentially link the cameras together, one camera together. So if you have an A camera, you can color like a hero shot, like say of you or me, and then it'll ripple down to all of them if you want it to.
Okay.
And then you can undo that. I'm sorry, unlink it, and then do fine tweaking to each one. Similar in Avid, you can just color one and it'll ripple. Premiere, I believe, can do it, but I'm not exactly sure. But essentially, yeah, you would do a base grade for the most part, and then go back through when you're watching it and being like, oh, that one I need to tweak a little bit. The real hard part's camera matching between like a GoPro and a Red, or like a RE, or an iPhone, and trying to not take the lowest common denominator if you can help it, and elevating everything. But a lot of times it has to kind of come down.
Add a whole bunch of film grain into everything, then it all
Film grain and vignettes.
Yeah, that's it. So actually, we have a good question coming from Twitch. Moose does stuff. He asks, any hints or tricks for colorblind editors?
Colorblind editors. That's interesting. In terms of like editing, that's really tricky. I don't know. I mean, when I'm coloring black and white, it's interesting because you can, when you go into monochrome and you adjust each color channel, you kind of put yourself in those shoes and can see when it's black and white. If you lift the red values, you're going to see some interesting stuff that you wouldn't normally see in a full color image. So it's actually a good practice to bring something in black and white and mess with the different channels and just see what will make more contrast or less contrast, because you wouldn't normally think what happens. It's really interesting.
I've also seen I've
colorblind
seen on
things.
some of the subreddits I frequent, like the editors or colorist on Reddit, that
Yeah.
question comes up every once in a while, and it seems like the answer is always just like, go with your scopes,
That I
just trust
mean,
your scopes completely.
that
Right.
is the thing. As long as you have good scopes, and but to a certain point, I mean, you can get everything. You can get red to be red. You can get whites to be white and blacks to be blacks, and maybe rely on the skin tone line if you do rely on it. And then yeah, you'll probably be you could color a show by looking at scopes. It might not be creatively what you're looking for, but it'll
Mhm.
should be accurate.
He's asking what is scopes? What are
Oh, I'm
scopes?
sorry.
Scopes. No, it's okay. I wasn't sure
My
myself. I think
buzzword.
I have an idea,
Sure.
but yeah.
So there's a technical, like a science nerdy side of this where you run your feed usually over SDI so that you have an accurate, you have the ones and zeros, right? And it goes to some weird graph. You may have seen it before that looks like almost like an audio waveform
Yeah, I'll see if
for
I
the
can
red
pull one up.
channel, blue channel, and green channel.
Kind of like a
Um,
histogram.
you could do, there's histograms as well.
Oh, okay.
Depending on the level of scope you get, there's different types of graphs. Like Tektronix makes an expensive one that has something called a double diamond display. There you go. Matt has
Oh, okay.
a bunch
There
of
you
different ones up. That looks like
There we
Resolve.
go. That helps.
Google for the win.
Yeah. So essentially, in the upper right, the parade gives you the red, green, and blue channels, and you can kind of rely on that. If they're touching the top, that's the brightest point, and the bottoms are the darkest point. And depending on your color space, which is super nerdy, you can figure out what's legal and what's not. And then in the lower left, the vector scope will tell you that looks similar to a skin tone line, maybe how it's angled up to the left. But as you go around that circle, there's the different colors. You'll see R for red, magenta, and all sorts of stuff.
Wow.
I
You can
mean,
kind of tell that that's skin tone just from looking at that little
I
squiggle.
don't. Maybe. I mean, typically that angle right there is
Uh-huh.
what a skin tone line would be on, kind of.
Oh,
It
neat.
does not. It's not exact, but if it's around that angle, typically it's a proper skin color, and that doesn't necessarily mean black, white, or whatever. It actually measures the blood under the skin, and that
Huh.
quality is consistent across most people. Now, there's some debate recently about that, but for the most part, it's looking at the color of the skin from the blood. It's really interesting. It's a whole
Wow.
rabbit hole.
Wow,
Yeah,
that's
and
pretty cool.
there's some nice. I mean, just on YouTube, there's some nice tutorials. I think Black Magic, as part of their like official training for Resolve, I think they have a whole bunch of sections about scopes.
And
Yeah,
their
you can get
black magic
nuts.
stuff is great. There's some good people on YouTube, like one guy, Casey Ferris, I've watched for a long time. He does a lot of cool stuff that's he's good at dumbing it down for someone like me when I'm like, I don't want to hear ones and zeros all the time. I just want to see kind of what he's up to.
Yeah.
And then there's some paid ones like on lynda.com that you can get free with your library card. But Resolve or Black Magic has a ton of good ones for free, just
Nice.
ready to go. It's nerdy, but if you can pay attention, it's like a college course for free.
Oh, that's cool. Right on. Well, I hope that helps answer the question.
I
There's
just
also
confused
another
everyone.
one. There's also another from YouTube. Richard Putnam asks, this is a Premiere question. Do some of you have issues with playback JKL in Premiere Pro 2020? I'm guessing something funny with his keyboard shortcuts.
JK and L, it's different ways to play. If you hit, I mean, I don't do as much. L lets you go forward, but if you hit it more times, it goes faster and faster.
Oh, okay.
J is just in reverse, and L, I think, is just pauses or stops.
That makes sense. Kind of
Yeah,
forward, back.
it gets dicey in Premiere. I don't think it works as fluidly unless you have a really beefy CPU. I mean, GPU helps, but they don't tend to work as well for my testing purposes. But I mean, I don't want to totally dump on Premiere, but its trimming functions aren't as fluid as I've noticed some other ones. So it's not just you.
Yeah, I think,
Okay.
I mean, because the latest, I think it's still in beta, they finally added GPU accelerated decoding for H.264 and HEVC. So that might end up helping.
Yeah.
I did a little bit of testing with it, and I was getting worse performance with it. I mean, it's beta. It's beta, so I mean,
Okay.
like, you know,
Your
beta stuff's
mileage may
always
vary.
weird. But I'm very interested to see if that kind of helps out too, because a lot of people, man, they'll edit H.264 and they've got a beefy system, but it's just H.264 is terrible for editing.
Yeah, those.
And there's some, and it depends on like even your camera. Like we do a lot of our testing with, I think it's 150 megabit, and like a lot of systems can play it fine. We had a customer send us a test clip the other day. It was 40 megabit, 1080p. You know, doesn't look scary when you just look at the file, but playing it back, like nothing can play it. Like nothing. I threw it on the most powerful systems, and it's some weird. I think it's like an older Sony camera or something. And so like all the different. There's more than just H.264. There's all the different encoding schemes that every camera uses, and like it gets better on the newer cameras. And
yeah, if you get like the old XD cam, it has long GOP footage, which is super nerdy, but group of picture encoding, and it will tear your system to pieces. But I mean, over the last 5 years, people have stopped kind of transcoding stuff, but that's really the only way I worked for 15 years was you bring in the footage at a ProRes or a DNX codec, and then the computer processes it better and it just will work more fluid. But if you do those H.265s or H.264s, even like you said, even like beefy systems will choke. So it's not just, there's a lot of factors in that kind of stuff.
Premiere did just add a bunch of updates to their proxy workflow too. I think now you can, what did they add? I think one of the biggest things is they added better presets because their presets sucked before. So I think now they have better presets to use for making proxies, and they're giving you the ability to export with proxies now too. So if you want to just do like a review with like your client or whatever, you can just do it with proxies, and it's not a big deal. It's way faster for your system too. So probably, just like you said, the only answer is either transcoding or use proxies.
Let's see.
Proxy talk.
Yeah, that's always interesting concept.
Codec.
Well, because I guess so. This kind of ties into something I noticed in a previous interview that we had. You list yourself as an online editor with some past experience with offline editing. And that had come up, those terms had come up in a talk with Oliver Peters, talking about like old school editing where you were like practically physically cutting the film and that kind of a deal. I'm still don't really have a good grasp of the difference. Online versus offline editing, because it's not we're not talking like doing this in the cloud, or this has a different sort of definition.
It kind of comes back to the film days, but essentially the offline editor does story and the online editor does technical and color stuff. So when I was an offline editor, I'd be more apt to be getting a script, going through it, making the scene story wise make sense, and sometimes doing some After Effects or whatnot depending on the show, and then hand it off to an online editor who would take my nonsense and make sure it was formatted correctly, the colors were legal, the text looks legal or needs to be fixed, or an animation is bumpy, or essentially make it look perfect. Where the offline people, while a lot are very good, most of the time they're just concentrating on story, and rightly so, and the audio, and make the most sense for someone watching it and who doesn't care, like my wife, about the color being bad or errors technically.
I see.
So those shows on Netflix that like go out and it's still in log, that's because they don't have good.
I saw a Netflix show in log.
There's a couple, and I've seen some people trying to figure out like why would they do that, and one, it's just a big mistake, or two, they for some reason think it's some sort of cinematic look.
That's what I think, because Netflix is very tight on their QC. I mean, rounds of QC.
Yeah, I would think.
And they're very critical. So if it came out log, it's probably a creative decision.
Yeah. The only other one that kind of made sense to me is someone was saying that it might be like they have a director who doesn't understand like anything about like the actual like film and codecs and all that kind of stuff. So what he was seeing on set was it in log. And so then he had it in his head that that's what it's going to look like. Oh. And then when they actually went to the editors, maybe they actually graded it. It's like, no, that's not right at all. That's not what we saw.
I I mean, it's funny because I do deal with directors, but I actually don't deal with them as much as people probably think. I do a
Mm-hmm.
lot of more documentary unscripted stuff, but um, once it's directed, they might watch it and say like, "Yep, looks good." So, ooh, for a log thing to go out is
Huh.
a little tough.
So what is log? Uh,
Oh, sorry.
sorry.
No,
I
yeah.
think I have an idea,
If you
but
see like a really flat image that looks gray,
uh-huh.
and you're like, something's weird with that, like it needs some color, that's
Yeah.
probably log.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's basically it looks desaturated, and the reason why you do it, oh man, I don't know if I'll get the technical reasons right. When you compress things into like the center, so it looks desaturated, you
Uh-huh.
can basically expand it afterwards in color, and you get more like data in like the highlights or the really deep blacks because it's not like clipping or anything like that on either end. So you have to like re-expand it out to make it look like real color.
Huh.
Is that
It's
about
called
right?
dynamic range, and
Yeah.
it's essentially if you look at a gradient of like a blue sky,
Yeah.
and the more if you ever see banding, it's like lines kind of from
Mm-hmm.
compression. That's like low dynamic range sometimes. The
Okay.
higher the dynamic range, which is log typically for the most part, will allow you to have a more smooth gradient when you're color correcting across one color. So the more dynamic range, the higher quality overall it'll be, but
Okay.
less compression artifacting and like light to dark or very bright to very dark in like a shadow and a bright sun. You'll get more detail typically.
But you actually have to
Oh,
do
I see.
something with it.
Yeah. You have to do something with it, which usually you just contrast and you're usually almost there.
Huh. Okay. That makes sense. I was just getting some feedback saying that my audio has moved mostly to the left channel. Do you guys hear me okay?
I'm hearing, well, we're hearing something different than I think the stream.
Uh oh. No, well they should be the same after
Oh,
we hello? Hello? Left? Right?
no,
Left?
I'm
Right?
hearing you on both.
Just fixed back. Not sure what was gremlins. I don't know. Weird
Oh,
technical.
gremlins.
When you deal with technology, you get technical issues. So that's cool. Um, headphone. Oh, haha, new caves. Okay. Um, I'm curious to know more about just I guess overall the work that you do. You said you work a lot more with documentary and unscripted. How is that different from scripted and regular TV? I
It's
guess.
actually quite a bit different. So, documentaries are a lot of found footage or still images or archival footage that needs the frame rates to be the same in the end.
Mm-hmm.
So my job is to kind of make it if it needs to be delivered at 2398 frames per second, then I need to make anything that's like 2997 the same frame rate. I also need to match the resolution and up res stuff, meaning if it's something from the 90s that needs to be 4K, I need to hopefully polish it up and make it look more detailed, add some
Yeah.
sharpening or color it. Um, then unscripted is a whole different beast. That one people underestimate. So those reality shows that everyone thinks are just garbage or whatever, they're the most work out of anything by far, 100%. And they take the most time with the lowest budgets.
Imagine the editing, just the I suppose since we learned a new term today, the offline editing part of unscripted television must be incredibly difficult.
Hmm. Yeah, it can be because I mean, if you think 1,000 hours of footage because they're filming 12 hours a day with 10 cameras and they all have
Right.
to be grouped, you watch them, then they got to find a story. So sometimes they'll just go in and, I mean, they might have a clue of what they're looking for, but you still have to watch all the angles, listen to all the microphones, and make sure that someone doesn't say something off camera that you could use to make them look silly or whatever. I mean, yeah, a lot of things happen, but take a lot of organization. The assistant
Mhm.
editor is very, very, very important in that because they need to name the tapes right. They need to organize it correctly. The B-roll, if it needs to be labeled, needs to be like Bluebird in Los Angeles in summer of 2020, as opposed
Wow.
to Bird City. You know, I mean, there's
Yeah.
stuff like that that just it makes a big difference when you're searching and when you have to go fast. And then sometimes the story producers will make a rough cut and give the editor that, and then the editor polishes that up. and a lot of it's made in the edit with the editors and the producers. Scripted is a whole different ballgame in terms of online editing. It's a lot more conform based, meaning I just take what they give me and I make sure it matches their reference exactly. And typically I haven't had to go off the rails too much on scripted stuff. It's pretty strict, if that makes sense, and regimented, where unscripted is kind of like, let's make it great. We don't have all the money, so you might have, or me, I might have to do titling or cameraman removal or blurring, or maybe I'll make a change in the story because we saw something when it was color corrected that just didn't make sense.
Yeah.
Once we got it on up-resed and looking great.
Wow. Yeah, it would make sense, I guess, that scripted would be, I guess, not easier but that strict, because they have you have it almost all planned out kind of ahead of time.
And there's a lot of people that get paid a lot of money to make sure that what started off as their vision stays that vision.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I wouldn't. Easy's not, like you said, not the word, but it's different, and it's a whole different political ballgame than what I'm used to.
Oh.
Yeah, it sounds like it's just less hectic, maybe.
It's just different. So like offline stuff, or I'm sorry, unscripted stuff can be fast paced and lower budgets, but if you're good, you'll be working because it takes a special skill. And scripted, I don't have as much experience, so I don't know the skills for that, but I just, it's from what I've seen in the assistant editors I've talked to, it's different, and it's not the same path, career path. It's different, very different.
Okay.
So you really don't get very many people that will work on both. Most people kind of like specialize, kind of like what you have.
Sometimes, yeah. So like I had an assistant editor friend of mine from years ago that he made the jump to scripted. That was a very purposeful decision, and he really tried hard to do it, and it paid off. But yeah, typically I don't see many people jump unless they're like, you know what, I'm done with this. I'm gonna try to be the whatever, some HBO scripted show, and then you work your way in and make it work by showing the skills that you learned while doing documentaries or unscripted. Because if you can do a show like I worked on The Real World, or what else did I work on? A few other shows. If you can do those, you can pretty much handle yourself doing anything.
Nice.
It's a big skill set.
We have another question from YouTube. Lana Lauren 1 asks, with COVID, should new people rethink how to start out? Should we build work-from-home systems for remote jobs at a company, or work on small projects to build skill, then eventually get paid work as a freelancer?
Oof. That's a loaded question.
I suppose your perspective,
all of it. So
yeah.
I mean, personally, when people ask me, what do I do? I would used to say, find someone like me and ask me questions, or how do I get in? Where's the job? And who knows, maybe you catch me on the right day and someone emails me about some assistant editor job, and I can just be like, yeah, here you go, email this person. And that usually works. Internships were the best if you can handle it and you don't mind either not getting paid or getting paid little, because you could just sit with the editor and watch what they do, and that's invaluable. These days, it's a weird world. I mean, I say get Resolve because it's free, and if you can learn Resolve, you can get the basics of everything. You have a phone. I mean, even if it's not a good phone, grab it, film stuff, make a 30-second short film, and do everything from start to finish, from filming it, storyboarding, writing the story, filming it, color correcting it, exporting it, put it on YouTube. I mean, the only way you can learn is by putting yourself out there and getting feedback. These days, if you're stuck at home with 3 kids like me, film a video with your kids, and action movie dad, which I'm sure you've.
I was just about to say him. You could be the next action movie dad.
He's my favorite. I love, he's in Target and he's filming the Frozen. What's the moose's name? Whatever. Walking through the aisle, and I'm just like, this is the best thing ever. If you can start with that stuff, and you can just film yourself at Target and comp in a Godzilla or something, I mean, you'll probably get a job if it looks like his stuff. And
there's like 2 people that I follow everything they do. Action movie dad, and just on YouTube, but Buttered Side Down is like one of my favorite guys on YouTube. It's like terrible VFX, but he's gotten a lot better. He's been doing it for years. But
What is
he's
it
one of my
called?
favorite YouTube channels. Buttered Side Down.
I'll look that up. That's
Like,
funny.
like
I
on Toast.
love that
I
stuff.
had to check that out.
Yeah, his stuff is great, especially his older stuff. He's starting to get like sponsors now, so he's
Uh-oh.
actually starting to have money.
Now he's real.
But
He's good.
yeah, but like his early stuff is great. It's I don't know. I've always wanted the Corridor Digital guys. We do a lot of work
Oh,
with them.
they're
And
good.
they do the VFX Artists React. Kind
Yep.
of want them to do one for one of his episodes, just because it's not good, but it's like intentionally not good.
Which is a skill. Like
Yeah, exactly.
I've had to work on stuff where they're like, make it look bad, but then they're like, but also don't make it look bad. And you're like, what?
Okay.
So yeah, there's a skill to make. I mean, I call it crapify, but you gotta, if you can make it crappy but also really funny, then that's worth its weight in gold.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Like, to learn this stuff now is tough. So if you can find something you want to mimic it and do it, put it up and see what hits. I mean, you
Yeah.
never know. Stupid stuff is funny to me, at least.
Yeah, it's hilarious, especially when they keep it nice and short, like a couple of minutes, minute
Yeah.
video. Terrific.
That's what I love. The Action Movie Dad stuff. It's just like a 30-second clip of some dinosaur walking down a street, and you're like, that's amazing. But
It is.
like I couldn't do that in like a day. So
I love
It's
it.
great.
It's so cool. Not so much a question, I guess, but Moose does stuff. He comments, did you ever have to do the I do everything sort of stuff before getting into your specialization?
yeah, I still do. Yeah, I started writing for Post Perspective in college. Well, Post Magazine in college, and then the editor moved on and did her own thing, and that's Post Perspective. So I write for her, and to be honest, that's where I learned a lot of stuff, because I would get free plugins to play with or hardware. Like I'm streaming with a GoPro 9 right now, and I get to mess with that stuff, and I learned a lot of stuff just by tinkering and kind of throwing stuff around.
Yeah.
And I don't get paid for it, but I mean, I'm on here with you guys, so there are benefits to working for free if you can afford it.
Sure.
And that stuff is, I mean, yeah, getting to play with toys is halfway to learning your specialization. Like if you can just mess around and learn everything, I know that's a bad statement, but knowing a lot will help you prosper. I mean, now even today, I'm an online editor, but I do After Effects, and I know like mocha tracking, which not everyone does, or green screen keying, which not everyone does. So learning like the Adobe Suite or Resolve or After Effects or Nuke or Flame or Nakota or I don't know, Hit Film or Vegas or whatever. The more you learn, the better.
Yeah.
But to that same point, jack of all trades, master of none holds true. So make sure what you want to do is what you want to do, and the other stuff is just kind of great at that point. I mean,
Right.
I wanted to be an editor, so when I first started, I was a post coordinator and a post supervisor. And at one point, I was just like, no more of this. I don't want to be on call 24/7 about questions about why this clip went to air when it wasn't the wrong clip. So
Oops.
I kind of took some time off and became a substitute teacher in my off time
Oh,
for
cool.
junior high, which was insane. And then yeah, and I think it actually helped me. So then I finally got another job as an assistant editor. A post super friend called me for it, and I was lucky enough to go that route. But I was like, you know what? I just can't do this anymore. Focus on what I want to do
There you
and
go.
keep going, but also learn everything you can, I guess.
Yeah, it does seem to make. I've heard similar where it's good to know like the whole process, even if you're only focused on one piece of it, because you can always. It's always such a good idea to know that, because if you can make the next person in line, if you can make their job a little bit easier by knowing what they're gonna have to go through, if
They'll
you
love
screw
you.
up your piece, it makes everybody's life, and it ripples all the way down to the final product. Because it applies to our work, it applies to everybody's work.
Oh,
Try
it
to
does
make the
for-
next person's job easier.
A rising tide floats all boats is the way to
Yeah.
live, because
Yeah.
if you don't, people, I mean, you might work for a little bit, but once people realize that you're failing upwards, you're gone. And then if you can, my theory is just, like you said, make everyone's life easier. And then when they go, why is there never any problems with Brady's work? And they're like, oh, well, he's helpful with the PAs or the kitchen staff or whatever. I mean,
Yeah, anything.
you know, I'm gonna get a coffee for someone. It's all good. Then everyone loves you, and all of a sudden, 10 years later, that PA is an executive producer.
Yeah.
And that actually happened to me. There was a show I worked on where the PA was a nice kid from the Midwest, and he did a great job as, you know, as the PA, and I was nice to him. Like, I think you should be nice to everybody. And I taught him some stuff here and there, but then 5, 6, 7 years later, he called me and was like, "Hey man, and there's this job. Are you interested as an online editor?" And I'm like, "Yeah," it paid off. So
Yeah.
definitely don't burn your bridges if you can help it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll also plug a little bit for Adobe. Adobe Max this year is free. That's mid-October. So if you do like, you want to, you know, see some sessions about like After Effects for video editors, they do a lot of those crossover kind of
that
sessions.
stuff's good.
So you can always just sign up for Adobe Max. Again, it's free this year. Sign up for whatever sessions you want. I already have my like 3 days is like booked all day.
They have great stuff, and if Andrew Kramer's on there, watch him.
Yep.
That's a name that keeps
I think he's
coming
a
up.
couple.
I feel like I know that name from
Video
another
Copilot?
angle. That's why I know that name. Yep. Okay. That comes up a lot. The guy, I think
his tutorials are great.
He has single-handedly been like, just from the number of times it gets mentioned, he's had like the number one effect across all of like YouTube and like indie film and the DIY visual effects. Everybody is like, dude, Andrew Kramer. I watched his tutorials in the beginning. All of this stuff. He's like the best.
Like half of our After Effects benchmark projects are based on his tutorials.
They're amazing and they're easy, and he's funny. And that's another person I tell, watch his like 8 or 10 beginner tutorials. You know, they're a little old, but you can find them. And you learn the basics. You learn the little things to get around in After Effects. So when someone says, "Hey, we got an After Effects project, can you jump in and mess with it?" You'll be like, "Yeah, no problem. I can do the basics." And then they don't have to pay for someone else to do it, and you just save the company money.
Yeah.
Because sometimes it's just like, "Hey, can we change this text?"
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
And not everyone can do it. So if you're the one that's like, even if you're the PA that's not supposed to be working, and you're like, "Oh, I know After Effects," and they're like, "Can you change the text?" And you're like, "Yeah, no problem. Oh, you'll be hired the next month."
Yeah.
Yep.
That's awesome. This is kind of related to the jack of all trades stuff. Being good at editing, does that automatically make you good or semi-good videographer, since you know what to look for and how to frame things?
I don't think it does personally, but since you do know the tricks or what's bad, I like a hobby, photography and doing video stuff. It takes a lot of practice, but since I do see the bad stuff, I can kind of be like, "Oh, okay, I need to light the shadows more," because when I see stuff that's super crunchy and there's no detail in the shadows, I kind of get bummed out. So if I'm doing a family video of my kids throwing mud at each other or whatever, just expose for the mud, and it's weird. I don't think you can automatically be good at it just because you watch it, but if you practice it, yeah, you can be good at it, at both.
I'm curious to know what has been one of the, I guess, roadblocks. What is something that kind of stands out as, and since we're talking kind of on the topic of like making the next person's job a little easier, what's something that kind of holds you back? Something that, like, when you get a project and you're like, why did they do this?
Besides people
and
just
also
not
how do you overcome it?
Sure. Besides people just not doing it right, I mean, that's the biggest hurdle. But I'll tell you what, even if you don't know anything about the software and you deliver it to me wrong, if you're a good person and I can talk to you in a reasonable manner and we can figure stuff out, it's all good. Like, for the most part, I mean, as long as you don't make a show not make air,
sure,
we can make it work. But if you're a jerk, that's no one will help you. I mean, I'll try, but everyone has a limit. So once you hit that limit, they're gonna be like, "Nah, we're good. I'd rather just work with someone less experienced, and we'll figure it out."
Okay.
Personality is the biggest roadblock for me.
Wow. Is there any sort of technical challenge that kind of sticks with you? Like, I don't know. Oftentimes I hear about like playback scrubbing is a pain in the butt.
I see. I'm lucky enough to work with really high-end systems. I work for a big company that allows me, like iMac Pros and certain Nexus servers and SANs and Linux boxes with a bunch of Titans in them. So in that respect, no. However, when we get hard drives from people that are USB 2 and I have to
Ooh.
transfer 100 gig or 700 gigs of stuff,
Man, you
I got
you
to
go
be
take
like,
a
sorry
nap.
guys, come back tomorrow.
Yeah. Oh, that's rough.
Yeah.
Actually, that's funny. I just recently. Oh, I've been looking for a KVM,
Oh yeah.
and blows my mind how hard it has been to find something that has at least one USB 3 on it. I
Yeah.
can't. But that's I
It's
digress.
tough. I got a new Dell monitor to review, and it was a big, wide 49-inch one, which is simply too big, but amazing. And it had a built-in KVM, which was I didn't care for it at first, and then I'm like, you know what? I love this because my kids have play like Fortnite or whatever behind on another system, and I'm like,
Yeah,
I don't want to switch the mouse and keyboard every time, but this is like built-in KVM. Boom, here we go. Beautiful.
that's nice.
Yeah,
That's cool.
KVMs are weird, but great.
You don't want to see our KVM setup over in labs then.
Yes, I
Our
do.
KVM setup is it's crazy. Because all of our systems, all of our test beds go to IP KVMs, so you
Oh.
can remote in, over the internet, and we kind of
Yep.
had to do that for COVID stuff.
Yep.
And man, doing 4K of those they're expensive. They're like $500 a pop.
Yeah.
But then from there, then we go to a 4K normal KVM, so we can have just one display. Because we used to have actually a monitor and keyboard and mouse for every single test bed.
Oh yeah.
And just now that we're not there local, it doesn't really matter. So yeah, we have 8 test beds going to IP KVMs, which then go to 4K KVM, which getting 4K KVMs is actually really hard. And the one that we got was surprisingly affordable, which I don't know if it's going to last.
Uh-oh.
But we'll see. But yeah, it's kind of a mess.
KVM nightmare.
Yeah.
You'd think that we'd have come a little further along in that respect, but
I
guess
just don't think people think about it. They don't realize that that's such a big deal for people that like you or me.
Yeah.
If I have 4 computers and I'm exporting on each one and I just want to go boop, 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 switch back and forth real quick. It's not easy, like you're saying.
Yeah, we've
Yeah.
got like 16 test beds always running.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, we need to have access to those. Half of them we've moved into our server room now, because I don't want to listen to them. Like, yeah, it takes a lot, but it's worth it once you get a good setup.
Yeah. We have another question from YouTube. Garrett Reviews asks, do you have set rules on how long a scene should be, or do you edit according to how you feel about the scene? Thinking of people like Casey, whose scenes never linger very long. I'm guessing Casey Neistat.
Yeah.
But
So that's an interesting question. The YouTube editing stuff is a whole different beast. That's a different genre, it's its own thing. And it's great. And it's, I get a lot of inspiration from stuff like that, but it's different. In terms of what I usually work in, it's pretty, networks dictate a lot of it. A lot of it has to be under 8 minutes or over 5. And so you kind of just stick to it. And then you would just puzzle like a puzzle. You just kind of say, we got a 2 to 3 minute one here. We got a 4 minute one here. Put them together. They make sense. And we'll pay it off in Act 6 or whatever structure you have. But if I'm doing something personally, I think I have a good sense of what is dragging on too long. Mm-hmm. And if I'm like kind of zoning out and just like being like, oh, this is cool, I'll just be like, yeah, something was wrong. So in that Walter Murch blink of an eye stuff, if I'm bored, there's something wrong. So fix it. And it could just be a music cue, or it could be, hey, pull 2 minutes out and make it a 1 minute act instead of a 7 minute act. And that happens. If something's not working, I just delete. And then eventually I'm like, oh, there was a bunch of garbage in there that maybe the people wanted in there to make story points, but doesn't work. And it makes people zone out. Sometimes it works. Sometimes people say, you're wrong, put it back.
All right.
It depends on how you're working a lot of time.
Then you get those action sequences for like one punch. There's like 20 different camera angles. Just
that you have to
here.
Yeah.
Those
You
are
have to
terrible.
put all the angles in for that.
Yeah.
Required.
I have noticed as time has gone on, especially in movies, that there's a lot of, I guess, transitions or it feels like a lot of jump cuts, actually. Just like you're over here, over here, like every, I don't know, 5 seconds. Is it just me, like, or is that actually like kind of an industry thing, or where the editing is?
I think YouTube did it because they just cut in the middle of sentences for dramatic effect sometimes, and I think it carried over because like I'll watch stuff like on YouTube and be like, you know what, that was a cool transition that guy had, and then the more I watch it, I probably just get used to them cutting in the middle of sentences that I normally wouldn't, and then maybe someone caught that and was just like, cool, let's just cut. No one really cares when you step back and look at like the grand view of something. If I mean, does anyone really care if your hat goes from the left to the right, continuity wise?
Right.
Maybe not. My wife doesn't care. I'll care and I'll point it out and write to all my friends, but she'll be like, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. You're ruining it. So to that point, I think
there's a Starbucks cup.
Yeah. Oh,
yeah.
You know?
Right, with the watch showing where it shouldn't be.
Yeah, stuff like that. And do people care? I don't know. Probably not.
The internet
not in
cares.
the end.
Yeah. Yeah. Here's the question. I think it's going to be more toward Matt from Jose Contreras. He asks, any motherboard is good for video editing, like the Asus ROG Strix Z490E?
That's more of a Friday question. A lot of times on Fridays when we have like our lab guys on. I'll just quickly give a little answer. The brands that we tend to gravitate towards is Gigabyte and MSI. If a motherboard from them doesn't have the features you need, then yeah, you can go outside. But I'd say Gigabyte and MSI are probably the two top brands for like reliability. So that's a quick answer for a Workflow Wednesday stream.
Yeah, and you know what? A quick plug, because you guys didn't ask me to do this, but over the, I don't know, 10 years I've been writing reviews, for everyone out there, the Puget systems came to me as a reviewer the cleanest and the most organized I've ever seen it. And they sent me this binder that was, all the specs the benchmarks that applied to me. So Resolve or Photoshop or Premiere. And it was remarkable to see it. So their PR guy, your PR guy, Kevin, who I've been friends with for a long time, I tell him, I was like, to be honest, like, I don't lie ever in a review, but if something's terrible, I try to avoid it unless it's absolutely necessary. And for a lot of these things, I have to tell people, like, it was shipped terribly. But the way Puget sent it was like, oh my God, this is exactly, if I was to buy something, I always tell people I would rather buy through you guys than someone who is more money or they. Yeah, and it's true. Like, I'm not even putting you on, because when I saw that binder of all the stuff, it was like, oh yeah, like, duh. Who doesn't want to? If I'm a Resolve guy, I want to see what Resolve does. I don't want to see what other nonsense testing that doesn't, like gaming testing. Like, it's cool, and maybe I'll play Fortnite at 240, but not Resolve. I want to see how fast my Neat Video noise reduction renders on dual 3080s or whatever when that comes out. So I want to see that Neat Video that crushes every system ever, which you'll get with Puget. So it's a great.
Neat Video doesn't support the new cards yet, unfortunately. I tried to run it.
Are you sure? Neat Video 5?
Yeah, it doesn't support it yet, or at least not the Neat Bench. Maybe there's a newer version than the.
So the Neat Video does, and it can, inside of the app, you can run the benchmark, and it'll say what's best to use, and it'll give you FPS. But
so we're not running that yet on the new cards. I don't even know if we've had any sales for the new cards yet, because I think we just got our first shipment in. So
time to buy them.
Yeah, they're probably already all allocated.
Right.
The first month after a launch is always super rocky, just for supply.
I have a question for you, actually. A lot of times people ask me AMD versus Intel or NVIDIA, and I've used both, and I find them both have their positives. However, if someone's building a Resolve-based system, are they going to lose a lot by using AMD products over, I don't know, I forget the AMD product numbers, but like a 2080 versus the 560 GPU? I forget.
5700X.
That's it. Yeah.
Right now, like anything Adobe or Blackmagic, pretty much almost anything in content creation, NVIDIA has a huge lead.
Yeah.
They have a lot more expensive products, so like you can go higher up, but also if you're just going to spend the same amount of money, NVIDIA is
the way to go right now.
NVIDIA is just the way to go. Just everybody. I think a lot of it's due to CUDA. It's not the raw horsepower, because like in games, AMD can be, can match or beat NVIDIA. So it's kind of like an optimization thing. But from what I've heard from like the developers, CUDA is so much easier to work with that they can spend more time on optimizing than they can with like OpenCL. So on the GPU side, it's definitely NVIDIA. On the CPU side, it depends. I would say AMD has most of the lead most of the time. Intel still has a few times where they're better, like Photoshop. I think Intel is slightly faster, but like there's very few people that only use Photoshop.
Yeah.
They use it as like a secondary. So most of the time, AMD is better on the CPU side. The difficult thing is that since Intel owns Thunderbolt, or they created Thunderbolt, Thunderbolt works way better on Intel-based systems. There's a few like AMD motherboards that have Thunderbolt, but in our experience, it's terrible. Like it might work for you, but more than likely it won't.
Yep.
So that's one of the main reasons we still sell some Intel systems for like content creation is Thunderbolt.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, and I use Thunderbolt all the time, so I have used on AMD systems, and it didn't work as well, but.
Yeah, it just seems to depend a lot, because man, Thunderbolt is just so complex. You've got like the drivers, you've got the firmwares, you've got the hardware, and everything has to work together. And that's why like Thunderbolt on Apple works really well, because they control everything.
Yeah, and it does work really well.
Yeah. But on PC, they've all got to work together. And for whatever reason, on AMD stuff, I don't know if it's like due to like the BIOS teams or the firmware teams or what, but it's just way better on Intel. Way more reliable.
Yeah. Why can't it all just be USB-C? What's the deal? What's the problem?
For like hard drives and stuff, sure. But it's all the people that are trying to use like displays.
Yeah.
It's those old Thunderbolt displays. Man, yeah, the people who are using Thunderbolt 2 or even the original Thunderbolt displays, and like they're trying to make it work, it's like,
Thunderbolt 3 displays are great.
Yeah, those are great.
Yeah, they're fun. Plug and play, done.
Boom. That'll be cool. I yearn for the day where that's the case for everything.
Yeah, right.
I wish. That's what USB was supposed to be for a lot of stuff, not for the displays, but. And then they got into, what was it, USB 2, then USB 3, then USB 3.1, and then 3.1 Gen 2, then USB
and then
3.0 and 4x4.
They retroactively renamed the whole like 3 series. It's like, it's not USB-C, it's USB 3.2 Type A.
Yeah. Come on, keep up.
I don't even know what it is anymore.
I thought we had a group that handled all this stuff on purpose, right? Like you can't just start naming things anything you want.
But they do.
Yeah. Sorry. Let's see. Oh, we did have a few more other questions coming in from YouTube. Garrett Reviews asks, does all the rules still apply that used to apply with film? Like wide establishing shot before the over-the-shoulder shot and close-up, half body legs, or is it okay these days to break all the rules?
I personally, I wouldn't take this for gospel, but I personally think you have to know the rules to break the rules. So if you can do the standard wide shot to a close-up or whatever to set up a scene, and you can do that well, and you understand why it works and how it works and what you should do, then who's to say you can't? Unless you're being paid by a network that says you can't. But if it's your stuff, you do you. So you'll find out. If someone tells you this sucks, then you'll be like, oh, maybe I should have gone back to that standard workflow and not chop off heads or, chop someone off at the knees. So I think if you know the rules, you can break them. But if you're just breaking them right off the bat, you might run into some issues.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, let's see. People asking for 3090 teasers. We can't talk about that. Yeah, come back tomorrow.
We're not going to start leaking stuff. We're not those people, unfortunately.
Yeah, don't do that.
Sometimes I wish.
I wish.
It's like every other launch.
Yeah,
every other launch, it seems like someone put something up early, and then everyone else floods like, oh, well, if they did it, we can do it.
Yeah. I love seeing, I don't love seeing leaks, but I when I see leaks of stuff and I'm like, ooh, I already know all this, but I'm like, I got to keep quiet because you're wrong. It's great.
Yeah, it's hard that the default answer always has to just be, I can neither confirm nor deny because
don't know.
Because we know, but we can't hint either way.
Yeah.
or else
Those-
NVIDIA
I'm-
takes all of our toys.
Oof,
constantly sketched out about. Wait, did John tell me this, and so I can't repeat it, or did I read this from
that's
someone
me
else? And
all the time. When I'm checking embargoes, I have to make sure my editor. I'm like, okay, can you please verify the embargoes 7 times because I'm scared to death to post something.
That happened with us. Wow, I probably shouldn't get into too much, but last week with the 3080, like we were told over and over and over, our embargoes was last Thursday, and then like a whole bunch of reviews went up the day before. We were like, whoa, what?
Yeah, you're like, wait a second.
And it turned out that like some people had special permission, and like so it's always hard to keep track of, especially now because we have like paper launches, and then we have like review embargoes, and then press embargoes.
I was gonna say press launches.
And then like sales embargoes, like when and we're super weird too because we do a bunch of articles and reviews, and we sell workstations.
Yeah, so you're in an interesting spot.
Sometimes we can talk about stuff kind of because we meet this one embargo, but we can't do it here. It gets a little bit weird for us.
I find
that
it
is
odd.
So odd.
When
I just wish everything just had one date again. Just
you can
announce it. It's there. Done.
I find it weird when it's like you can talk about price and like physical specs, you know, how big something is or whatever, but you can't talk about performance. Well, then why bother talking about it? Like, isn't that I don't know.
It's just hype generating.
That one also smells of something fishy. So.
Yeah. Right.
Whenever I hear that, I'm like,
a little sus.
Yeah. Well, sometimes too, I think like to be positive about it. I think sometimes it's like the drivers aren't. Really like finalized, so they're worried someone's going to talk about performance and with an early beta driver. And the performance is crap, but it's like, well, it's a super early beta driver, and the next week, it's better. They fix
that. Actually happened to me on a review recently, where I was like, the touchscreen isn't. You could probably figure out what I'm talking about. The touchscreen on the back of it didn't work as well. Then the firmware update 3 days before the release, I was like, oh, nailed it.
Okay. Yeah.
So luckily I didn't write about that.
So we have another question from YouTube. Hakan Broderland asks, when you get hired, does the studio provide you a machine to work on, or do you bring your own?
These days, I've been lucky enough to work at places that give me the machine to work on. In terms of working at home now, so my company let me borrow an iMac Pro. I also have my system for backup in case, and plugins that I have, like Neat Video, which I don't have on this system. But I use that, and I remote in via HP's remote graphics setup, which is called ZBoost Central now, I think.
I've heard good things about that.
It's incredible. And then there's some technical nerdiness, but I'm able to watch it on a Apple TV, and it looks almost, I would say 90% that I'm in the building that I would normally be in. Like it's incredible. I mean, I get dropouts and frame stutters every now and then, but for being at home, I mean, I couldn't really ask for anything better unless I had an unlimited download speed and a 10 gigabit internet.
Right.
But yeah, it's
one thing.
Great.
One thing I'll tack on just from our own experience, we're starting to get more customers who, like existing customers, they buy systems from us already, and we're starting to ship out to different addresses because like it's individual, it's going to the end users.
Oh yeah.
And for a couple of them, we're starting, like I mentioned those IPKVMs where you can remote in and it's hardware level access. You can adjust BIOS settings, you can install Windows remotely. For a couple of our customers, we're starting to set up a system where their IT staff can remote into the system before we ship, so they can get it all set up for the end user.
Oh, that's cool.
And then it ships directly to them, so it doesn't have to go to their IT facility first and then get reshipped.
Wow, that's really smart.
Yeah.
So that's definitely, there's more of the people providing home systems, it feels like.
Yeah, I love the RGS stuff is incredible. Like my company has a bunch, so I can log in. If one goes down, I can log into another. And it's just a flip of a switch. Other than a VPN setup, it's pretty painless for what it is.
Awesome.
Yeah, you do have to be a little bit, I feel, careful with like color. I feel like color is the biggest thing that is really hard to do.
You can
do the offline editing, but not the online.
Yeah, you can if you get they send me a monitor that's been calibrated and professionally calibrated, and over the NDI stream is very good. I think you could
That's cool.
feasibly color correct off of it. I mean, a lot of people probably tell me I'm full of it right now, but you can
Those are the
do
people who
what
say
you
you
need
need
to do. Oh
Flanders
yeah,
monitors only.
you need the Dolby Vision whatever 30-50,000 dollar monitor. Which yes, you should have that for Netflix when you want to do Dolby Vision. But for what I have, it's an amazing setup, and you can get by pretty easily
Hmm.
That's cool.
with all the money in the world
Yeah,
Yeah,
right.
that's the thing.
and networking.
So I'm gonna squeeze in kind of a two-part question because
Uh-oh.
it's asked from two different people, so I'm gonna smoosh them together. What and I suppose multi-faceted question because it came out of like what's the best video editing software like, as far as like easy to learn, and then there was a question about workflow differences between like say a comedy and a documentary, and I'd just like to kind of maybe expand that to a larger question of just how is the process and workflow different depending on software and content.
Yeah, so I can put that in. Each software has its own perks. So Adobe Premiere is great. You throw whatever you want into it. Most people have it. You can go to After Effects easily, back and forth, graphics, Photoshop, all of it. When you get to my workflow where it's an offline to an online editor, and we use a software like Resolve, Premiere doesn't always send out data correctly, and Resolve doesn't always interpret it correctly. So going from Premiere to Resolve, if you have like a speed ramp or a time warp, it might not line up because they interpret them differently. And the XML or Resolve, someone's interpreting it differently. That gets tricky. When you're keeping it all within each app, I mean, it's all good. But when you start to do the more quote unquote professional workflows and people have their specialties in Resolve or whatever, it gets dicey. And that's kind of what I'm for, is I fix that and make it work
Cool.
over a couple of days. But the problem is a lot of people get mad because they don't realize, hey, I use Premiere, it's supposed to work. Well, you did, but you don't it's cheap on the front end, but not on the back end if you do this professional workflow because of how you need tape names on every clip. MP4s don't carry across time code, so you need to transcode them to .movs to keep the time code. Or when I go to Resolve, they're not going to link properly, and I'm going to spend 8 hours conforming by hand.
Wow.
And Avid is very good at keeping all that metadata in and not losing it, which is why you get a lot of grumpy old men like me saying Avid is pretty rock solid compared to everything else.
Yeah.
But you have to know its intricacies, and it's not easy to learn. But
I've heard
if
that
you can learn Avid, you can know everything, I think, and you'll usually be good at it. If you know Premiere, you can basically do the same. You just miss on a lot of the metadata info to make sure everything has a tape name, everything has time code, everything's transcoded to a mezzanine file or a common file that computers can edit from easily. But these days, I always say Resolve is the way to go because it has the best of all the worlds, and if you can learn Resolve, you can go pretty much anywhere. I don't get Final Cut projects a lot. I don't think I've ever gotten one in 15 years professionally. Personally, I've used it, but not professionally, so I can't speak as much to that. But it's every software is different. So if you can dedicate yourself to learning it and be open-minded about what's good and what's bad about it, and find out why Premiere is troublesome when you go to online, or why Avid can't import XMLs, you're probably in the right headspace to be comfortable in anything. But Resolve is typically the one that's like, in my opinion, you learn it, it's free unless you need the noise reduction or the GPU stuff, and get it, and you can make anything with it.
Nice.
Yeah, I really like Resolve or Blackmagic's. The way they do it. You know, they've got the free version that really just draws people in, and especially for like students. I've mentioned on a couple of these streams, my nephew's been doing some editing stuff and Resolve because you don't have to pay a subscription. You don't have to. I mean, no high school editor is going to use Avid, but like, none of that.
See, you're right, because that's the problem. If they could get something that's more Resolve-like, or if Resolve in a dream world bought Avid and made it more Resolve-y, then everyone would learn it.
Yeah.
But you're right. Avid's just too hard to get a trial
Yeah.
or a free, I mean, first or whatever that thing is. I don't know. And I've used
Yeah.
it for 15 to 20 years. So
Well,
I
and
love it.
Resolve
But
just has everything in one. I mean, you've got editing, you've got color. I mean, obviously color. You've got
professional color,
VFX. You've
like the
got
color that
sound.
people are using on movies. So
Yeah.
you really
It's
have no
great.
excuse to be like, well, I don't have the access to tools, but you do, unless you don't
literally
have a
do.
computer, which Puget will send you a free one. So.
Only if you have a certain number of subscribers on YouTube.
There you go. or you pay him money.
Contact us at marketing@pugetsystems.com. No. Wow. Okay. So I mean, we're a little over our hour.
Oh man.
I'll leave it open.
Going
I'll leave it
fast.
open to you, Brady. Is there anything you'd like to mention or talk about? Any advice or anything that really comes up that you think everybody ought to know before we go?
Yeah, just be kind to everybody, please, for the love of God. It's hard enough for everybody, especially I don't know how parents that work at, or that have kids are doing it. I have three, and God bless my wife. I don't know how she does it, but when I'm in here, it's tough, man, and everyone's going through different stuff. So if you have an argument over whether a 3090 is better than a 3080, I mean, let's keep it simple.
Yeah.
Don't be a jerk. And also, that goes forward with working. I mean, like I said, if I have a nice person that doesn't know as much, I'm gonna work with them way better than I am with someone who's a jerk, and I'd rather not talk to. Let's just, I would just appreciate it. It's hard out there.
Especially now.
Yeah, it's so tough. Everyone's got stuff going on, so let's just all keep that in mind.
I like that. Yeah. Just be nicer to each other.
Be
All
nice. Pretty simple.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, Brady, for taking time out of your day to
problem.
join us on our Workflow Wednesday. It's always so enlightening. I love getting to see how all these. There's so much more involved in all of these different industries than I have ever suspected, and
Yeah.
it's super cool to see everybody's little niche, everybody's like thing that they do the best, and it's so cool. So thank you very much, Matt.
thank
Thank you
you.
as well for taking time out of your day. And thank you to the audience as well for joining us today. Thank you so much for the questions. It really helps a lot. It makes everything so much better for people down the road as well who watch this later. We do this every Wednesday and Friday at 1 o'clock Pacific time. Wednesdays we bring in industry experts like Brady here to talk about what they do. Going to give you guys a chance to ask questions and get a little bit more knowledge on what they do and all that good stuff. And then on Fridays, where is it? Over there, boop, Matt, and our other labs, we're on a rotation.
I think you
with our
just
labs
flexed.
guys. Man, you threw off my pattern. On Fridays we bring in our experts to talk more about the crossover of hardware and software, and again, kind of give you guys an opportunity to ask some questions in that space as well. So mark your calendars: Wednesdays, Fridays, 1 p.m. Pacific time, and that's it. So we'll see you guys next time.
That's it.
Thank you.
Bye.